Welcome to DownNotableContent. We are Alex.
And SJ Herschel. What do you think about consoles with varying powers? Let's get right into it. Herschel.
How you doing, SJ?
So, did I tell you about how my neck was hurting?
No.
Like 2.5 weeks ago, I woke up in bed, laying on my side, on my right side, and I went to lift my head to wake up, and as I was lifting my head, I felt something move or some kind of sharp pain in my neck, and I immediately couldn't move my neck anymore. So I got back down, went into bed. I couldn't really do anything for that whole day, and in fact Erica had to stay home to kind of like take care of me, because like I couldn't really lift my head without doing it with my hands.
When was this?
I couldn't support my head with my neck. This was about 2.5 weeks ago.
Oh, man.
And it's like the kind of pain you get, when you sleep weird.
Mm-hmm.
So it like hurts to turn one way. It's one of those things, but it was really intense. And after resting for a day, I could walk around. I couldn't look to the right, but I could, operate as a human being. Now, and then a couple days after that, it progressively got a little bit better each day, but past a certain point, it hasn't gotten better. I went to a chiropractor. He did these little adjustment things, and that made it gave me a little bit better, like, range of motion with my neck, but about a week went by, and then it kind of went back to normal. So I don't really know what's going on, but my neck has been quite painful, and it's starting to worry me a little bit, because usually that kind of stuff goes away in a few days, and now I've had it for like half a month. But aside from that, I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing great. I get married in 4 days, which is super exciting.
Oh my goodness.
I finished my playthrough of Twilight Princess, and I finished Celeste today before I came over here. So, it has been a good couple days.
So, do you want to quickly share your thoughts on the final boss of Twilight Princess that you told me?
Yes. Yeah, so here's the thing. I don't like Twilight Princess's final boss for the most part. Twilight Princess is split up into 4 phases. You have the first one where you have Puppet Zelda, and then you go into Beast Ganon, and then you fight Ganondorf on horseback, and then you have a one-on-one sword fight with Ganondorf. Puppet Zelda I really didn't like. It's like the traditional tennis stuff that we did for the first time in Ocarina of Time. But Ocarina of Time does it so much better. I really struggle because and then in Dark Beast Ganon didn't like that either, and didn't like horseback Ganondorf either. The final one-on-one sword fight is actually really well done, and I really, really like it. It does some things different from other Zelda games. It doesn't have like the rule of 3 where you do something 3 times and it's done. Like, you actually have to hit Ganondorf a lot, which is really, really good. But it kind of highlights my problem with the other 3 phases, is that Ganondorf has so many frames of invincibility that don't make sense for him to have. Like, when he is playing as Puppet Zelda, the only way to hit him is, to play your little tennis match, and then he gets stunned by a ball. But that's not the only thing he does. There are other times where he like dives at you with a sword, and you can jump out of the way and like slice the body like it would hurt. And like that would make sense, right? Like you're literally
Right.
hitting the body with it, but it just doesn't do anything, and he just keeps floating by. I'm like, what the frick? Why? And then in Dark Beast Ganon, you spend so much time just waiting for him to come at you so that you can do this one attack that will stun
Right.
and then allow you to hurt him. But like, it's not like a normal amount of time. Like I feel like you would like sit there for like somewhere between a minute and a half before your next opening comes.
Yeah.
And that really bothered me. And then on Horseback Ganon, kind of the same thing as before. Like you have Zelda on the back of Epona with you, and she has to stun him with a light arrow. But even if you were to ride up right next to him and slash him with a sword, wouldn't do anything. So you have to stay like Z targeted onto him from behind for like 10 seconds before Zelda shoots off a shot, and even then it like
perfect angle.
It doesn't perfectly hit him every single time.
Yeah.
And so for me, before I replayed it, I was like, oh, I just remember that fight being really, really long. I don't really like it. And that's not really the problem, because I enjoy longer boss fights. I just struggle when I have to spend so much time of it waiting. And it's not like I was ever in danger of being hit. Like, it's not like he's attacking you back. You just can't hurt him.
It wasn't an engaging sequence of battles for you.
So
okay.
I was pretty
fair.
disappointed, but that final phase is still very, very awesome. And overall, I had a great time with Twilight Princess. It's better than I remember it being. So I enjoyed it a lot. But yeah, I was kind of disappointed in the final boss.
So I know I told you this over text, but like in my mind, just from my recollection of games that I've played, and man, sorry guys,
for the buzzing, guys.
The buzzing thing.
It happens.
Yeah, we just can't figure it out. But sign up on our Patreon to help us get better equipment. In my mind, I remember Twilight Princess being like peak boss battle, like in that game. I remember really, really loving it, and I can think of all of the battle sequences that you're talking about, but I also haven't replayed it since I was like, I think like late middle school or early high school. That was the last time I played through that game. So it might be a little bit of nostalgia talking. I need to replay it again to really, get an updated feel for how the boss fight has aged.
I will say, overall, throughout Twilight Princess, like, it's probably the best in terms of overall boss fights. Like, I really enjoy a lot of the boss fights in that game, and I think it's because you have a lot of
good ones,
items that are fairly unique within the Zelda series, especially in the second half of the game.
Yeah.
And so when you're using those items to fight, like, those fights are different than any other fight in the series.
Cool using
it's
those.
super fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let us know if you liked Twilight Princess's final boss, and if I'm just wrong again, because a common theme here in my life, and especially on this podcast, is that I tend to be wrong. So
man,
so
that's not true, and it's all subjective at the end of the day.
Yeah,
or you're wrong.
It could be.
I feel like there was some gaming thing I needed to say. I am making good progress through Tears of the Kingdom. I finished the Thunder Temple. I've got Riju helping me out now, which is cool. Don't worry, I won't talk any more about the details. No spoilers. So yeah, but I don't really know where the story progresses from there, so I need to go to my next checkpoint to see what happens.
And just so you all are aware, me and SJ were helping one of our aunts move the other day, and he came to me and told me this, and so this is something that y'all need to be grateful for, because we know that it's been a while coming to give you Tears of the Kingdom content, but SJ's decided to let go of some of that curiosity that kind of infects you as you're playing that game, and push through the main story so that we can get to a point where we can be talking about the game. So he's sacrificing a bit of his experience to bring content for us.
I will say so I basically told Alex, hey, I'm just gonna play through the story so that we can talk about Tears of the Kingdom. Right after I beat that, though, I did see a Molduga in the distance, and I just had to beat it. So I did that.
You had to.
I did that.
You have to.
But now I'm going to get back on track with the story. So making good progress. But yeah, what are we talking about today?
So a few days ago, I saw a report about a rumored PS5 Pro.
I heard about that too, but I don't know any of the details.
So I don't remember tons of them, but I do know that it's supposed to have 8K capabilities. So above 4K, right? We're going to 8K.
I'm going to look it up.
There's something about like some AI powered machinery in it as well that makes some effect on the model. Greater base storage for your digital games, so you'd have more space. Something about like an increased amount of T-flops. I don't know what T-flops are.
Teraflops are, it's kind of like the horsepower equivalent.
Okay, so there you go.
Of PCs.
And so just things here and there that make it more powerful. The SSD, from what I understand, which affects load time. Sorry, we're going to try to make this episode very accessible for those of you that may not know all of the tech vocab, because I definitely don't. But one of the PS5's big strengths is that like it can have like close to no loading times because of some tech that it has in it. And that's supposed to stay the same. They don't have a new version of that according to the reports, but those are the main ones, is the graphical updates, some AI tech that's supposed to help with an accelerator or whatever, and then a little bit more horsepower to handle games running at a smoother rate, which I think they said is supposed to lock them at 60 frames a second for every game.
4K.
At 8K resolution.
8K 60 FPS? That's actually crazy. So, yeah, I just looked this up, and first of all, I don't know if this image is accurate, but it looks wacky.
Oh, it looks horrible.
Like
the way that the actual PlayStation looks in this.
We'll put up a picture.
It's bad
for you guys that are watching video. Yeah, so the current PS5 has 10 teraflops. That's like, well, and then the new one is supposed to have 23 plus teraflops. So theoretical, more than twice as powerful. I question that a little bit, if I'm being honest. That's more of like a generational jump, not a PS5, PS4, or PS5, PS5 Pro kind of jump. But anyway, yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. So basically they're saying that they're going to be putting out a big thing. And I'm not going to talk about the price or what I hope it does to the base model PS5, because this brings up a great point.
Do we know the price?
It's rumored to launch somewhere between $499 and $599. So the original launch model.
What?
Yeah. So when the PS5 launched, right, it was a $499 for the disc version. Or maybe that's at least what it's at now. And they're saying that this is going to launch at the same price, because that's what PlayStation did last generation. They had their PS4 launch at $399, and then when they released the PS4 Pro, they launched that at $399 and cut the price of the base model.
Insane.
And I know that there are also reports that it will be $599, so $100 more expensive for those upgrades. But either way, seems like you're getting a lot for that extra bump.
Oh yeah.
But this brings up a great point. When the PS5 and the new Xboxes launched, the Xbox is launched with two models. They launched with the Xbox Series S and the Xbox Series X. And the Series S is a less powerful version of the Series X. Mm-hmm. And some people were very, very upset about this. And here's why. For developers that are making games for these consoles, they have to make it work on every available model. Which means that all of Xbox's games has to be able to run on the less powerful version. Which means those extra powers that come with having a Series X don't get utilized to their full potential. And now with the PS5 Pro coming out, it's not like developers are going to be able to go out and say, okay, we're going to make a game that's made to be run at 8K, locked at 60 frames a second, uses all of this processing power, because it has to be able to run on the base model PS5 as well.
Now, is that true? Because it runs differently on each console. It's not like they're both running the same game. Like, frame rates differ. Like,
okay, so
right?
what I have to say is, I guess that the game has to be able to run on the lower model. So at the very least, there has to be a version. Like, because of that, I've heard that developers have to cut portions of their game because they can't have parts of it that have to have this higher end model. And so even though frame rates are different, like content in game and the game run,
they're somewhat
has to
back.
Be compromised.
Yeah, okay.
And for Xbox, this has been a thing for the last 2 years, right? And I mean, even going back to last generation, Microsoft and Sony did this, where they had their base model and then their more powerful models.
Yeah, Microsoft had 2 more powerful models last gen.
And so herein lies the question: is it a good thing to have these 2 different versions of the consoles? In my mind, you have a pretty clear list of pros, right? You have, well, for people that don't care about having absolutely top of the line but still want to play games, they can just get the cheaper model, and it's fine. You know, they save money, they still get the same experience. However, the con that comes with that is that your games are limited, and you have like a ceiling that has to be met, or that cannot be passed as a developing games. And so a lot of the time, your tech isn't utilized to its full potential. And so with that kind of laying the scene, how do you feel about that as a PC master race gamer who can control your own specs?
So when you first brought up this concept to me, I was like, it's a good thing in my mind. That was kind of like my first reaction. And the reason is that more options are better for the consumer. And I don't know, because and I'm kind of thinking from a PC gaming perspective where, like you said, the specs can completely vary. I could play the latest hot titles on my PC, which is relatively on the more powerful end, but somebody that has a PC that's half as powerful could also run that game. All they need to do is turn down the texture settings and make it a little less fancy looking to get it to be a smooth gaming experience. So in my mind, okay, well, if we're talking about Xbox, the Xbox Series S is basically it might be running a game at, I don't know, 720p, 60 FPS to get whatever game we're talking about to run smoothly. And maybe the Series X is running it at 1080p 60, or maybe it can go up to 1440p 60 FPS. But I hadn't really considered what you just... So in that sense, if that's the only limitation, right, the developers just have to integrate some sort of way to account for the difference in power to just make it a smooth gaming experience, I don't really see a downside with that. But I didn't really consider that entire aspects of a game or portions of gameplay could be altered or completely removed because of the lack of power on the weaker ones. I'm trying to think of what why that would be.
For example, right, when PlayStation 5 launched, up until now, a lot of their games still launch on PS4 too, right? But there are some games that have been PS5 exclusives, like the new Ratchet and Clank game.
Because of the SSD and the fast loading times.
Right. And so there's that kind of stuff where because there's limitations. And so now looking forward to this upgraded model, their games still have to be able to run using only those 10 horsepowers versus the 23 that the Pro's rumored to have.
But what I'm saying is that's not a fair comparison, though, right? Because you're talking about the PS4 and the PS5.
Mm-hmm.
Those are two different generations. So,
but I'm saying like those features of the game, right? Like your portal jumping, that's a feature that couldn't run on the PS4. And so even though that's cross-generation, now, like developers... Anyway, sorry, keep going. I interrupted. Just
No,
just
you're
roll
good.
with it.
So I'm just thinking, like, loading times, like that is something that can completely alter gameplay for sure. And that's where the SSD comes in. That's the storage. But from my understanding, I don't think there's a difference like that between the Series S and the Series X, or right, like the main difference is the computing power that each have, the teraflops. And those, in my mind, can just be, we'll just run it at a lower resolution to get it to work on the earlier game. But I guess there's stuff I'm not considering, like when you have a whole bunch of NPCs around, for example, like a lot of these open world titles, that takes a lot of computing power, so you can't just dial down the resolution and expect it all to work at a lower resolution with less fancy textures. And I'm also not a game developer, so I don't really know what I'm talking about. But I would be curious to know exactly what those challenges are, you know, that having to create for both, you know, two different powers basically of that these consoles have.
Yeah.
So, but is it good or bad to answer that question? I honestly don't know. Like with my knowledge, limited knowledge, I really can't say. But if it is really, like you said, that it actually impacts like the developer's creative ability to implement certain gameplay aspects of a video game, then I don't really like that. But I'm also coming from a privileged position where I can afford to buy, you know, whatever console or PC. So I'm sure people out there that can't afford the Series X are very grateful that the Series S exists. So I don't know. Do you feel like it's bad or good?
So I think it's a good thing still. Even with the potential limitations that are placed on developers, I think it's a good thing, and here's why. When I heard about this, I went and listened to a different podcast that was discussing the topic, and they were, you know, very, very against the idea of having less powerful consoles launched with each other. They think there should just be one console for whatever company, and that's what you need to roll with. But I just don't think that's the case, and there's two reasons. First off, if someone were to buy a Series S over a Series X, they have to understand, and I'm sure most of them do, that they understand that compared to the Series X, there are going to be differences, right? Like graphically, it's not going to look as pretty. There are going to be limitations in that aspect. But I think most people now in the video game world understand that. Like they go into that purchase knowing it. So it's not like they expect to get the same performance as a more expensive model.
Right. It's marketed appropriately. Yeah.
And, you know, it does bring in issues where, this was something that was brought up, is that when game companies are putting out trailers at Gamescom or E3 and showing off their games, they're running it on the most powerful model. But at times, that's not representative of what's possible on the lower model.
Yeah.
And so people go in saying, there are these bugs, there's these graphical issues that they didn't let us know about, and they should have. But they were like, but these people that I were listening to put it really simply, they were like, they should just show off games on the like base model that's available. And if they do that, then people can't complain. And people who have those more powerful versions just get, you know, extra little surprises for having that. But I think my main problem with this is actually related to Tears of the Kingdom. A lot of reports came out that I think there was like upwards of 30 developers that that spoke to someone and basically said, like, this game shouldn't be possible. This game should not be able to run on the Switch with the specs that it has. We have no idea how they did it.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if the issue with lack of quality between potential console versions has less of an issue to do with the console's power and the developing of the game itself, and just kind of a lack of ironing out the experience for everyone involved. Because the Switch is less powerful than both of those consoles, but it's running this game with very, very few technical issues. And so in my mind, if people are having issues with that, I don't necessarily think it's the console's fault. I think it's more on a developer to understand these are the limitations. We need to make it work within the limitations.
And cater an experience to that.
Right. And so I still think it's a good thing. I think the issues are resolvable, but I think saying, okay, we're going to have one model cuts out a lot of people that probably want to have these gaming experiences and takes opportunity away, which is a big thing for me. I don't like when opportunity is taken away from people for any reason. So I think that's kind of where I stand on it, is having a PS5 Pro does not lessen the value of a PS5. There might be a price cut and people might be like, oh, well, now I need to upgrade. And in my mind, honestly, you don't. Because there's another question I want to ask you. How much further can we really go?
So, can I actually go back to answer your original question? Because hearing you talk about that stuff kind of got my gears going. I think in a perfect world, I do agree that I think it's a good thing overall. And I do think there is a little bit of a polishing issue that has been plaguing the gaming industry just in general, really. And Nintendo games, typically, especially the Zelda team, they optimize the crap out of their games. And yeah, they squeeze every little ounce of juice that this little Switch has got. But I think one thing that is a bit problematic is if Xbox or Sony force developers to dual release on two different consoles. So, like, if it's going to be a limitation to the developer after the PS5 Pro comes out, assuming that those rumors are true, if Sony is like, oh, you can't just release a game on one, you have to release them on both. And they have to both be running well, like, somewhat comparably, or whatever. That, I think, is a problem. I mean, I don't necessarily think that the problem outweighs the option of having a cheaper and more expensive fancy console, but I think in a perfect world, what would be best is if the developers could do whatever they want. So maybe there is a crazy ambitious title that they want to make for the PS5 Pro that just is not going to work for the base PS5 model. Let them do that for the higher end console.
And then just say, this game is
it's an exclusive for that one. Kind of like Xenoblade was on the new 3DS. I think there's one other title. I know that's a really controversial take, but I think the reality is, like, just because, like, I don't understand the nuances of a game development, I'm sure there are a lot of difficulties when it comes to developing for two different power levels at the exact same time, and you're still expected to release the game in a reasonable time frame, and you can't just indefinitely keep delaying because you're developing for two different consoles. So, like, and then I think what would happen is you would have a few games, I don't know, and this is total speculation, I could be totally wrong. You'd have a few games that are, like, really ambitious that would end up on the more powerful console, but I don't think every developer would just only develop for the more powerful one, because they're going to realize that there's a huge market for the cheaper console.
Mm-hmm,
So there will be good games still coming, right? Like, I think that open market would be healthy.
But I think therein might lie a problem, is that saying, okay, this one's only going to be for the PS5 Pro, like, financially, I don't know how Sony as a company, or Microsoft for that case, like, could justify it, right?
I know, I agree.
Because it's like,
it's not a good look for them.
And say they have, at the end of the generation, okay, we sold 100 million PS5s. They don't designate which one was a base model versus a pro model. And I'm sure they have that info, but they don't tend to share it with the public. And so say PS5 Pros only make up 30% of that, then 30% of their player base is the only one open to taking a game. And even then, it's not like every single person that owns a console is going to buy a game, right? Consoles always outlast
Right.
however many game copies are sold. And so that definitely sounds like an ideal way, but like, from a realistic standpoint, it's just,
I know it's
not
never going to
feasible.
happen. I also realize that it's really flawed, because, well, if that's the case, then is it even in the same generation? Why are you even, what's the point of the PS5 designation?
Why don't you just call it a PlayStation 6?
Yeah,
right?
at that point, so I completely understand why that would never work. But yeah, it's nuanced. But what was your next?
Well, real quick on that though, for those developers that might want to do that, like, an alternative might be similar to how Microsoft has their PC specific store now, right? They have the Xbox store that's available on PCs. Like, that could be something that Sony does as well, is say, okay, this is going to be a PC exclusive, but through the Sony store. That way they retain their exclusivity. But because PC developers tend to have that freedom of like, okay, like, if you want the game to run well, these are the kind of specs you need to be meeting. And then that way they have a bit more freedom in being ambitious, right? Wouldn't that make sense?
So the answer is everybody just get a PC.
Don't do that. I am not saying that. I am against the whole PC thing. I've been fighting it. But anyway.
Just kidding. Yeah. No, it's, I guess bottom line is it's tough. I mean, seems to be good that there's options, right? But
it could be difficult.
We're just from the perspective of a consumer, so.
Yeah. And so my second question is, like, how much further can we go, right? Because the way I see it, going back to the generation of the Wii, the Xbox 360, and the PlayStation 3, when companies made the jump from the 360 and the PlayStation 3 to the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, like, graphically, there was a pretty decent jump, right? And size of games really increased. So there was like a noticeable difference. And now making the jump to these newer consoles that are built for 4K, more power, at least from what I've seen from people that have been playing these games and from developers, like, the jump in ability or in what we've seen hasn't been massive, right? And it's getting to a point now for me where, like, photorealistic games don't tend to look more photorealistic with higher fidelity graphics to my eyes anymore. And so we're kind of reaching a point where we're hitting that ceiling of, like, how much further can you really go? And as a PC gamer that has a better understanding of specs, what do you think on that? Do you think we're reaching a limit as far as graphical fidelity, processing power? Like, how much further can we really go as far as console upgrades in the future?
No, that's a really, really good question. It's really interesting. And I've thought about that too, because like, graphical processing ability, it's the more you upgrade, the file sizes required for those games, they grow exponentially. They don't just double, they grow exponentially. And graphical upgrades are, by nature, you just get diminishing returns. So, kind of like you were saying, especially when it comes to, like, photorealistic games and stuff, you can have a game running on the PS4 Pro and one on the PS5, and they can both look like pretty good.
Pretty similar, right?
The main, but I think like the earlier consoles saw the biggest jumps because of that, because they were still in their infancy. You know, when they first had the N64 and the PS1 and 3D gaming was introduced, and then the GameCube, and then the Wii and the Wii U. Like Xbox to the Xbox 360. I mean, that was a massive jump, but subsequently, you know, it's less and less of an upgrade, I think. But the thing that we have had a recent breakthrough in is load times that we were talking about. You know, SSDs that allows you to basically have, in a lot of games, like no load screens. You know, you might boot up the game and see a load screen at the very beginning, or if you like fast travel, you might have like a couple seconds of a load screen. But I mean, games on the PS5 and the Xbox, like, they are wicked fast to the point that you can just walk into stuff, you know, in the blink of an eye, be in a completely different environment. That I think is the biggest game changer, and that will only get better and better and better. But in terms of just general, like, the details, you know, the textures, the resolution and whatnot, like, a lot of people still game at 1080p because, like, the upgrade from non-HD, just like standard definition 480p or whatever, to 1080p was such a huge jump that nobody can go back. But from 1080p to 4K, you can kind of live with not having 4K, honestly. That's one of the reasons why I don't have a 4K monitor. I have a 1440p monitor.
Right, like Breath of the Wild, like, and Tears of the Kingdom don't run at 4K. But like their art styles make them still look beautiful. And I think like graphically, that's where we're going, is like you can't get more realistic. And so in order to win people over on graphics, it's going to need to be uniqueness.
The creativity, to make it stand out from the rest of the crowd. But I do think there's one aspect of graphics and eye candy that can continue to evolve, and that already has been evolving, and that's a thing called ray tracing. And if you don't know what that is, it's the a lot of video games, and hopefully I'm not like paraphrasing this incorrectly, but you know, when you see like shadows that are cast on objects and on the ground and the environment and stuff, it's not necessarily always accurate. So like you know, if we were to render this room in a video game environment, it's not going to be able to capture all of the different shadows. It's not literally calculating, okay, there's a light source there, so there should be a shadow there. It's not doing that. It's kind of like fake shadows that's there to try to make it look more realistic. But what ray tracing allows it to do, and this is something that you have to have in the hardware that is able to do ray tracing in order to have it be efficient, is it can literally realize, oh, there's a light source here, so there's a sun. So that means that, you know, on this horse, there should be these shadows. And then because it's this far away from the ground, the shadows on the ground should look like this. And it can even account for reflections like mirrors and glass and puddles of water. And it can look absolutely amazing. If you haven't seen it, just Google like ray traced Minecraft. It looks absolutely beautiful.
It's actually astounding. Like, it doesn't make a major difference like when you're in the heat of action and stuff, but when I play games, I take a lot of moments to just kind of like stop and like scroll my camera around and just look around. And the idea of doing, I definitely haven't played any games that actually have like ray tracing capabilities in them, but the idea of that is like actually incredible to think about how it's possible now, because that's so many different calculations to make. Within every single frame that you're playing, it's absolutely so amazing.
Cool. And so cool. Lighting, the technology of lighting video games, that I think will continue to make a big difference.
You think it'll continue, like the state that it's in now, you think there's still like major rooms for improvement?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because there's a lot of games now where if you turn on ray tracing, it takes a lot of computing power away.
So like your frame rates
might
will
go down
drop,
a little
it'll get
bit,
choppy.
and a lot of people still prefer to just leave ray tracing off because they want to get the smoothest
I see.
gaming experience possible.
That makes sense.
So that's and eventually I'm sure we will get to the point where ray tracing is standard, like 1080p is today.
Yeah.
Like eventually that's where we're headed, and I think that's where we're going to see the most improvements in terms of eye candy. It's not going to be 8K is, I think, hot marketing stuff.
Out of curiosity, I know that the PS5 has ray tracing options. Do you know if that's like something that comes in every PlayStation? I know that like Spider-Man Miles Morales, for example, like made like a big deal about its ray tracing. And so do you think, I don't know where I was going with this. I had a thought, but anyway.
The developer has to incorporate that into the game. So if the developer doesn't want to deal with that, then they're not going to enable ray tracing.
That would make sense.
Because I'm sure that takes time. But,
yeah,
but it's cool stuff.
Yeah. And I'm going to be real. The real reason I wanted to talk about this was because maybe the PS5 Pro exists, which means maybe the PS5 will get a price cut. So there's your weekly plug of Alex talking about the PlayStation 5 that he doesn't own yet, but
oh my gosh,
one day.
Yeah, and for you guys out there that don't have the fanciest stuff, honestly, you're fine. Just game your game. Don't mind any of this fancy nonsense. Yeah, because I mean, 1080p to 4K, it is a difference.
But again,
right?
like it depends on the art style for me. Like I don't think Breath of the Wild running at 4K would look crazy different from how it is now. Like I feel like the art style is very, very specific. Now for photorealistic games, it makes a difference.
Horizon Zero Dawn 4K, oh baby, that's beautiful.
Right.
But considering the difference between 1080p and 4K, the difference from 4K to 8K is going to be even less noticeable because of, I mean, obviously our eyes, right? So, but who knows? Maybe I'll be wrong. We'll see.
Thank you very much for watching or listening. For those of you who are interested in our social media platforms, the descriptions or the links to those, the info for those are in the episode descriptions.
Yes, and on YouTube, if you liked it, drop us a like. It kind of lets us know that you made it to the end of the video, and subscribe if you want to hear more from us. Our Patreon stuff is in the description as well.
And we want to thank Joshua, our down-to-earth cockatiel, and we have a new patron, Tyler.
Yes, we do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tyler.
You are also
amazing.
one of our down-to-earth cockatiels now. We're grateful for you. You guys are awesome.
Yep. We'll talk to you next time.
Yep.